The boogeyman is coming.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. What comes to mind?
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
We have eternity to know your flesh.
Piss your pants. I said, piss your pants.
I think we just picked up Dracula.
I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy.
You go right on your...
Stay when you're down here with me. You love soul! My family's always been in me.
My whole family are Draculas.
So horror movies, it is Halloween time. And this has been a weird year where all the normal shit for Halloween doesn't really get to happen. And one thing that is always associated with Halloween is haunted houses. And this is very much a haunted house movie that we are talking about this episode. And I've got a returning guest, a guest from the very first horror movies episode that I did almost a year ago. My best friend Jason Donnelly. How you doing, man?
I'm doing very good, Stacy. How are you?
I am doing much better than I was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Glad that you're better.
Yeah, for those who don't know, I caught COVID-19. Sucks. I still have not cleared, but I test again tomorrow. So as you listen to this, I have went and tried to not have COVID-19 anymore.
Yeah, I distinctly recall somebody saying that it was just going to magically go away, but I don't know.
I can't even,
wrong show for that, I know, but
I can't even get mine to not magically go away. Like,
we can't even get it to pretend, even on Halloween, you know?
No, and like everybody else who caught it when I did, all clear. All have tested negative. Just me. So you picked this episode.
I did.
And I kind of held it back till now because it fits the season.
Right.
Why don't you tell everybody what you picked?
I picked the centerpiece, the fulcrum of what's been known as the real estate trilogy from the master of horror, one of the three biggest Italian directors, Lucio Fulci. This one is called The Beyond, or as it's been known, The Seven Doors of Death.
Yeah, The Seven Doors of Death, The Beyond, the middle entry in, like you said, the real estate trilogy or the Gates of Hell trilogy. Right. This is the first Fulci film that I've covered on here. I am sure there will be more. But let's talk about Mr. Fulci for a minute.
Okay.
So, Lucio Fulci was born on June 17th, 1927 in Rome.
2 days after my birthday.
But many years later.
Right. Yeah, I'd be doing pretty good if I was, 93 he would have been?
Yeah, man.
Damn.
We would have an odd as fuck friendship if you were born in 1927. But he was born in Rome to a Sicilian anti-fascist family, which was important in those days. There were really only two sides to that. There's still really only two sides to that.
Right.
But it's something that's pointed out in every instance that I could find in looking at the history on Fulci was that His family was anti-fascist. He was raised by his mother and housekeeper.
Yeah.
His dad wasn't really around. Had, from all accounts that I could find, a pretty normal childhood. Decided to go to med school originally.
And I think that plays out a lot in his films because those gore, those gore sequences are really, while, that can be considered campy at the time as far as special effects go. His approach to the ways in which bodies were dismembered and mutilated in his films, the attention to detail, I think, comes from, really going in and figuring out, okay, what happens? What's an eyeball really look like when it's being ripped out or, forced out by a nail or,
Yeah,
whatever.
boy, old Fulci likes an eyeball.
Yeah, he really had a thing for that.
That is a kink for Lucio.
Yeah, everyone's got one.
That's true. In med school, he decided that there was more money to be made in film than medicine, and so he switched to film school. And
yeah,
that to me seems like a strange decision of like a financially based move into film from medicine, but I guess maybe in Italy the medical field's not quite as lucrative. I don't know. It was clearly the right choice for a time at least.
Right.
So he goes to film school, did that in Rome as well. And to me, the thing that surprised me the most, just because of who Fulci is, like what he's known for in his career, is that originally he was a documentarian and did comedy. I can't imagine what a fucking Fulci comedy is like.
Have you never seen any of the like he did children's films as well?
I have never seen a Fulci children's film. No,
they are about as innocuous as you can get. You know what I mean? As far like with regards to like children's films, and yeah, he did a lot of. He even dabbled in the rom-coms.
Wow.
Yeah, before he became the master of horror.
I'm guessing none of that stuff got like Americanized release or an English language release, right?
No, I don't think you can find. I mean, I'm sure you can probably find them somewhere on the web, but yeah, I think you might be able to find them on certain sites that specialize in selling movies. So,
right. Well, from that stuff, he moved on to doing the things that some of this I've actually seen that he's done. But he moved on to making giallos and spaghetti westerns.
For the apocalypse.
And in doing those, he gained his reputation for graphic violence, which is really the calling card to me of Fulci, is the graphic fucking violence that he does.
Yeah, the video nasty era.
Oh man, yeah, he is one of the lead proprietors of Nasty Videos, according to the British government.
Yeah.
And I mean, with reason in some cases. But yeah, I mean, to the point where on set, he had been taken to like use his name synonymously with when he wanted more gore in a scene, to just be like, Fulci, Fulci, Fulci.
Right.
Which is fucking amazing. And some of the effects were so convincing, and it's funny that this has happened to multiple people. As I go back through and I research the history on some of this stuff, it is not out of the ordinary for some of these directors to end up dragged into court in foreign countries.
Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah. Lucio Fulci, not an exception. He was dragged into court for animal torture for a lizard in woman's skin over some mutilated dogs.
That was a great movie. And that sort of crossover is a really interesting. I'm sorry to cut you off, but there's there's a really interesting sort of crossover. Maybe not even crossover is a good way to describe it. there's a point where the hardcore gore starts to enter the picture, and then where you have like like Bava when he started doing when he made Bay of Blood. It's also Twitch of the Death Nerve too, which got ripped off all the hell by later franchises. But those movies like Kill Baby Kill and Lizard in a Woman's Skin, I think to a certain extent, like Season of the Witch by Romero, those movies are they're not but really sort of psychedelic. So blending that Gaio or Gaio, I don't know how you pronounce it, but
I think it's Giallo.
Giallo, okay. You blend that in with the horror and that sort of psychedelia, it just makes for really, really good films. Some of my favorites.
Yeah, well, I think there's something. So when you have, like Giallo is like a thriller for those who don't know, and I think when you blend like a bit of psychedelia into that, it can make something that tends to kind of be boring in my book a little more interesting. And I think these guys everyone you named had a knack for that. Right. But so the Mutilated Dogs, man, he produces the puppets, he gets out of it. No harm, no foul. I think he's best known for Zombie 2, right? Or Zombie,
right,
as it's known in the U.S. But
right.
I think Zombie 2 is probably like the most well-known Fulci film. And then, I mean, aside from that, and I say well-known, but I think if you're probably a casual horror fan, you're like, who the fuck is Lucio Fulci, right? Like, you probably don't know his shit. If you're a serious horror fan, you know Zombie, and you probably know the Gates of Hell trilogy, City of the Living Dead, The Beyond, and The House by the Cemetery, the middle of which is this episode. But his other stuff, like Cat in the Brain and things like that, and I don't know that I think you have to be pretty hardcore into Fulci to even have that shit on your radar, right? Like that and New York Ripper.
You and I were just laughing about New York Ripper the other day.
Dude, I'll never understand the choices he made in New York Ripper. But
right.
I also don't understand some of the choices he made in The Beyond. So
yeah, and it'll be obviously we're going to get into the intricacies of The Beyond here in a minute, but yeah, and he did some great made for TV horrors movies that kind of it reminded me a lot of like Night Gallery, late Twilight Zone stuff. Yeah, I would agree that your casual horror fans probably know, like you said, just like the Zombie and the Gates of Hell.
Maybe Zombie 3. Maybe. I'm guessing
movie. Fuck that movie.
I'm guessing they don't know. I'm guessing they don't know Murder Rock.
Jesus. Yeah. I have a copy of Zombie 3. I think I bought it for like $6.
Yeah.
In the used section at FYE. If I can say, we may have to bleep that out, but because they're not a sponsor.
There are no sponsors.
Oh, okay. All right.
But reference whatever the fuck you want to.
I bought that movie reluctantly because I had heard so many bad things about that movie. I'm like, man, Fulci had a hand in it. I don't think that he had a heavy hand like previous films, but man, it was one of those cases where the masses were right. It was like, fuck this stupid movie. It is horrible. And I can see why Fulci sort of distanced himself from the production of that movie.
Yeah, it's not a good movie. He was also, I think he was starting to get kind of sick during that movie, during Zombie 3.
Was the when was that movie out? Was that early 90s? I thought that was late 80s.
Oh no, Zombie 3 is, I believe, I guess it's 88, so almost
88.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was what, 8 years before he passed.
Right.
So
yeah, I don't think he was well for a long time though. You know,
Right.
like I think, and you can kind of see it. Like if you look at pictures of him,
right,
he just kind of starts to. I mean, even in Cat in the Brain,
yeah,
he starts to not look so good. I think
but he definitely gave a valiant effort as far as the acting went in that movie. That was
he sure did.
I still think that's a great movie, and I think what was it? Grindhouse put that out.
Yeah, most of the Fulci stuff Grindhouse has put out. I think that's still who has the rights to all of it. It's all the good news is most of Fulci shit's on Shudder, which is nice.
Right.
There's no Murder Rock on Shudder.
Okay.
I actually don't think New York Ripper is on there either, but Cat in the Brain might be.
If I'll tell you what, if Grindhouse, after we get done taping this, I have to get on Grindhouse's site to find out whether or not they put out the rest of the Gates of Hell, because the last I checked, it was just Blue Underground and Anchor Bay. But if they retouched up all those films, fuck, I'm take my money. So
the two big names in Italian horror, I think, are Argento and Fulci, right? So yeah, but I would say you definitely have to throw Bava in there too. I mean, sure, but I think much to a lesser extent than those two. I mean, when you look at the importance and the catalog of each of them, Bava's great, but I just bear with me. I think it's Argento and Fulci, right?
Yeah.
They did not meet until 1994, which blows my mind.
There was a bit of a feud, though. I mean, wasn't there some sort of like there was some shit talking back and forth? There was maybe just some healthy competition.
Yeah, I mean, probably a little bit, and their styles were pretty different, to a point, you know.
Right.
But so they meet in '94 at a festival in Rome, and they decide that they're going to work together on something, and it never really works out that they get to.
So sad.
Yeah, Fulci was supposed to direct, and then Argento ended up getting sidetracked with Stendhal syndrome, and so the movie was supposed to be The Wax Mask, which was going to be a remake of a Vincent Price movie, The House of Wax.
Right.
And it ended up being directed by Sergio Stivoletti. And it kind of got finished after Fulci died. So it never really came around. And Fulci didn't realize how famous he was in the US, I don't think. He really only ever made one convention appearance. It was at a 96 Fangoria convention in New York City just a couple of months before he died.
Right.
He wasn't doing well then. But he was shocked at how many people showed up to see him.
That footage, which I can't remember what movie, I think they put it on the bonus disc of Cat in the Brain. I could be wrong. But watching that footage is really, I guess, as much as a horror fan's heart can be warmed, that it's touching to watch.
It really is. And it's a shame that he didn't realize or kind of take advantage of that earlier, because it seems like in his later years, things weren't great for Fulci.
Right.
Aside from being sick, he was also very poor.
Yeah.
I think the shame in that is a bunch of people made money off of his movies to a point where you would think he would have made a bunch of money off of his movies, but he didn't.
Bad deals. I mean,
yeah, and we'll talk about some of that, at least some of it with The Beyond. there was money made off of The Beyond, that's for sure.
I think of George Romero and the bad deal he signed on Night of the Living Dead. You know, like it became one. You know, it's one of is it not like one of the first or the first zombie film? You know,
of that type of zombie. Yeah, zombies have been different before that. They were like voodoo zombies, or they would be like, you know,
but
some sort of mind control.
But sort of the modern day zombie of what we sort of think of as far as how zombies are presented in film, that was really the catalyst for every zombie film thereafter.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But he signed some really bad deals, and all he was thinking was just, I want to get this out there. I want to,
I think in the case of Night of the Living Dead, though, it worked out for the best because it's now just open. Anybody can release the film. Anybody can do whatever they want to with it. And
I'm going to be doing my own here next week.
Your own release of Night of the Living Dead.
Agonist Revival presents Night of the Living Dead.
I wish you luck with it.
An Agonist Revival production.
So, Lucio Fulci died alone in his sleep in his apartment in Rome around 2 p.m. on the afternoon of March 13th, 1996, from diabetes-related complications at the age of 68. He was living in a small apartment. He had been forced to sell his house. And there are people who, and this is absolute rumor, and there's no proof that this is the case, but some people believe that he stopped taking medication that he needed to control his diabetes so that he could die. I just, that seems strange to me, considering, you know, that 2 months earlier he did that convention where he was so shocked that people cared about him. You would think that would, somebody with that, but who knows what motivates people to do what. But either way, at the relatively young age of 68, Fulci passed on, and he was, again, fairly poor at that time. Dario Argento paid for Fulci's funeral.
It's a good man.
Absolutely. And what's crazy to me is that Fulci really becomes more popular in death than he was during his life.
Woe be unto him who opens one of the 7 gateways to hell, because through that gateway, evil will invade the world.
So let's jump into this movie. We have The Beyond, also known as The 7 Doors of Death, also known as And You Will Live in Terror, The Afterlife / Beyond.
I would also like to, before we get, neck deep into this movie, I would like to just throw out a rest in peace to Killjoy. He was a huge fan of this movie, obviously. I believe there on the Grindhouse release of this is a necrophagia video. So,
oh, is there?
Yeah, I think it was pulled from the Through the Eyes of the Dead DVD.
Yeah.
But I believe it was the video for You Will Live in Terror.
Yeah, man, Killjoy was a good dude. I like that guy. I spent a little bit of time around that dude, and he was a good dude. He's definitely missed.
Sad I lost the cell phone because you guys called me up drunk as fuck. I can't remember what horror convention that was, but you guys
it was probably at Cinema Wasteland.
Yeah. He was there, and I had to be up early the next day because we were setting up a thing where, you and I and Killjoy can sit around and bullshit over the phone for a minute.
Yeah.
So I also have other ties with Killjoy and stuff. So he was a friend, and he will be missed. So
absolutely. So this film released in 81. Depending on which version of this movie you see, it's a different length. The standard version that you can watch on Shudder or on the Grindhouse / Anchor Bay release is 87 or 89 minutes, depending. And those 2 minutes from anything that I can find have nothing to do with any kind of gore. I think it literally is credits that are longer. The 7 Doors of Death cut is 84 minutes. Directed by Lucio Fulci, produced by Fabrizio De Angelis, written as much as the movie was written, and we'll get to that in a minute. But this movie wasn't really written. But Dardano Scacchetti, Giorgio Meruzzo, and Fulci wrote it based on a story by Scacchetti. And the music, which is an incredibly important part of this film, was by the amazing Fabio Frizzi.
Yes. I used to when I first got an MP3 player, my first like iPod, I had like 80 gig. So I'm dumping stuff in there. And I would say about half of that music in there was from, various, Goblin, Freezy. I would roll around town in my mighty 2000 Toyota Camry, just blasting do 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 do. Yeah, that soundtrack was really dark and beautiful, in my humble opinion.
It's different. It adds an atmosphere to the movie that already has an atmosphere that it's important. I'm a big proponent of the thinking that music and sound in horror is one of the most important pieces of it.
Yeah, I mean, they're inextricably linked. They're just it's I think it's something that was missed as, horror and gore films, violent horror films, or any sort of horror films for that matter, progressed, beyond the 80s into the 90s. I think it was something that was definitely lacking. They would just throw in a little bit of string here, or it just I guess it just depended on the budget, because you had a lot of those sort of like teeny bop horror films. I won't name them by name, but they
see, man, you're somebody who dogs on that shit, and I kind of liked some of it.
No, hold on. I'm saying the ones that were like the bigger ones.
I like some of the bigger ones. Scream is a great movie. I refuse to listen to anyone who says otherwise. It's a great fucking movie.
What about Scream 2?
It's a fine movie.
Scream 3
is a movie that was made.
Okay.
Look, man, I love Kevin Smith, but the minute you put Jay and Silent Bob in a fucking horror movie, I'm out. It's not
right. Yeah, it became, for me, in a lot of ways, it just became like you could just like a Nickelodeon production. You know what I mean? And I'm not putting down Nickelodeon or anything like that. I'm not putting down these films.
Good Burger? You don't like Good Burger?
You
can't do that on television.
Okay, all right. So there we go. That's but my boomer is coming out, so please forgive me.
You're not a boomer.
Well, saying something like that is very boomer.
You're a fucking millennial. Jesus Christ.
Right. Well, only by like 3 months too. So, I just, it's all a matter of personal taste. I'm not saying that, they're horrible movies, but,
I get what you're saying, though. There was definitely the focus on the soundtrack went more towards how can we sell copies of this soundtrack to people? Let's cram it full of bands as opposed to a score.
Well, I think it all depended on who was buttering the bread. You know, like if Interscope was throwing, you know, a couple million into a project, well, of course there's going to be nothing but Interscope bands.
Hey, that Crow soundtrack turned out all right.
Yeah. But I mean, when you start putting like Smash Mouth and maybe a Maroon 5 or something on a fucking soundtrack, like
the one that sticks out to me is the movie Disturbing Behavior, which I had challenged you to find another podcast talking about Fulci where Disturbing Behavior gets brought up. That the musical piece that links with that movie is Flagpole Sitta. That's not what a horror movie soundtrack is. You know what I mean? And there was stuff in the 90s too, like you have the Demon Knight soundtrack that was basically just an excuse to throw together a bunch of music and market it to people. It's a good soundtrack, but it's not like good movie music, you know?
An edited cut of Cemetery Gates.
Yeah. It had hits on it, but
yeah, sure.
That's not what these horror movies did, and I think that's a big separator. Like even with like John Carpenter shit, you know what I mean? Like I just spent time on a couple of episodes talking about Carpenter and what his soundtracks were like. And this is very much like that. This is that mindset in a soundtrack. Romero very much had that same kind of thing with the soundtracks in his film. So this is released April 29th, 81. It had a budget of $400,000, which to me, it's crazy that they were able to do everything they did in this movie on $400,000, even in 81. Even when you extrapolate that out and figure that it's, a little over $1 million now.
Adjusting for inflation.
Yeah. They shot part of the movie in Louisiana. Mm-hmm. And then the rest in Italy. Most of anything that's indoor, anything that's gore, is all shot in Italy. The things that look like they're in New Orleans are in New Orleans, including the causeway across Lake Pontchartrain, which they closed off to shoot a fucking bizarre scene.
That scene in particular, right there, is one of many in that film that really kind of grabs you. And anyone who's ever crossed that bridge knows just how weird it feels being there.
It takes forever.
And you keep getting lower and lower and lower, and you see the water going up, and it's frightening just looking at that bridge. But that scene with Emily and Liza, oh my God, it just it makes you just cringe in fear. Like this is a very surreal sort, which I mean, that the whole movie is just surrealism. So I that scene in particular has always sort of grabbed me.
Yeah, it's a weird scene. And so the cast, we've got Liza, played by Catherine McCall, or Katerina McCall. She is the only person who is in all three of these movies. She's in the entire trilogy, not playing the same character, obviously.
Right.
Which I think it's a strange choice that he carried one actress through all three movies.
Right.
Dr. John McCabe was played by David Warbeck. David Warbeck was in another Fulci film, The Black Cat. He was in Twins of Evil. He was also, him and another actor in this, Antoine St. John, who played Shuwick, the guy they kill at the beginning, the warlock. They were both in Duck You Sucker.
Huh.
Neither of them had a big role in Duck You Sucker, but they were both in a Leone film, which I think is interesting.
But wasn't Dr. Freudstein? Dr. Freudstein was Joe the plumber in The Beyond, and wasn't he a grave digger in House by the Cemetery or City of the Living Dead?
He's in House by the Cemetery.
Yeah,
he's not in City of the Living Dead.
Okay.
Giovanni Danava. It's not in. I mean, I researched. It's not. He's not listed in. No,
I'm not trying to get a gotcha on there, but I'm just I was just thinking about that because Joe the plumber is in House by the Cemetery. He's Dr. Freudstein.
Right.
Okay. Sorry.
Veronica Lazar was Martha. She was in Inferno. She's the only cast member that did an Argento film. But the guy who was in the most interesting movies is Al Cliver, who played Dr. Harris in this film. He was also in Zombie. He was also in 2 Jess Franco films, both of the Jess Franco cannibal films, Mondo Cannibal and Devil Hunter. He's in both of those. He's also in, and you've got to be of a certain age, I think, to know these films or be a certain kind of pervert. But he was in one of the Emmanuel films, Forever Emmanuel.
Huh.
You remember the Emmanuel films, Jason?
I do not remember those, sir.
The Emmanuel films were soft-core French porn from the 70s and early 80s. They were video store staples when I was a kid that I would look at the boxes with a lot of interest.
And then try to retain them.
Very much so at that young age. Very much.
And then get back in the car up 14.
10 to 12-year-old me very much liked the boxes for the Emmanuel movies. And they were conveniently placed in the dark corner with the horror movies. So
Right.
Yeah.
So we are talking about the same video store.
I am talking about Video Mania 2 in Salem, Ohio.
Okay. I was thinking about the video store by Rasool's.
Oh, in Washingtonville. See, that was my if my mom didn't want to waste a bunch of time for me to watch some movies video store.
Right.
The selection was much smaller, but they did have the porno room with the saloon doors.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember
almost every video store had porno rooms back then.
Yeah. I remember kind of trying to do like the whole get my head down, sort of just pass by it as many times as possible.
And the horror movies were right by it too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Because that's how I found out about the porno room in that store, because I was looking at the box cover for Luther the Geek. I remember it specifically. and looked to my right, and there were naked women on boxes. Yeah. I was like, "Oh boy, this is very interesting. I like this video store."
Right.
Teenage me was a horny young man. So that's the cast. The filming of this movie happens somewhat in Louisiana.
Yeah.
But it's limited. And to me, it's crazy because the cast is almost all European. So they bring all of these people over to film in the United States. And I think that's part of what makes this film feel weird. There's a number of things that make this fucking film feel weird. But I think one of the big things is you have this cast that is clearly not American, and it's taking place in an area that is very recognizable as New Orleans, southern Louisiana.
Right.
And there are choices that are made that go against the actual reality of that area as well.
Right.
For instance, a basement in Louisiana.
Yeah, no wonder there's a portal to hell in there.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be there.
Right.
It's flooded? Yeah. You don't say. A basement in Louisiana is flooded. I, sir, am shocked.
Yeah, I mean, considering you can swim through the living room in the main lobby in the hotel.
So it's filmed on location in 80 around New Orleans and in Metairie, Monroe, and Madisonville. And Larry Ray, who was a member of the Louisiana Film Commission, was hired to help scout location. Fulci took a liking to him and brought him on as a production assistant. A lot of it was filmed in the French Quarter. The graveyard scene is St. Louis Cemetery number 1. The historic Otis House is the hotel in the film, which is located inside of Fairview Riverside State Park on Lake Pontchartrain.
From what I understand, for $15, you can go take a tour of the place.
Oh, see, now that's some shit I would be into the next time I'm in New Orleans.
I spoke to a gentleman not long ago who was there, and he's a nice guy, but he said he wasn't gonna pay the $15. I'm like, why are you gonna be so fucking cheap, dude?
Yeah, dude, I would pay $15 to tour that shit.
Yeah,
like we said, they use the causeway. I think it adds to the weird feeling of this movie. It's clear that there's a language barrier. Like, the cast were English speakers. Fulci was not. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the direction in this film was done by him just like making faces at them and shit. Mm-hmm. And then Larry Ray served a translator. Yes. So yeah, the special effects are all practical, which you would expect from Fulci. They're also fucking gross, man. Like, so much of the effects in this are just rough.
Yeah.
The eyeballs especially.
The papier-mâché head of God, who is that gets eaten alive by the spider or by the tarantulas?
Oh yeah. Fucking doctor. Dr. Harris.
Yeah. That just the papier-mâché head is just, I don't know if I'm more creeped out by, flesh-eating tarantulas or the
which aren't a thing. That's
right.
That's not a real thing.
Yeah. And like this rewatching this to do this episode, I'm confused. Like, I think that because of the fall from the ladder, he's become paralyzed, but he looks dead, but he's alive again. Occasionally you'll see
You're trying to bring logic into this movie, Jason, and I think that's a mistake.
It's a huge mistake on my part, and I understand that. But yeah,
so some of the for how much some of the effects look good, some of the effects look dog shit bad. Like the specifically, no pun intended, but the dog chewing on the fucking neck.
Yeah,
that doesn't look good. That doesn't look good. I think the contact lenses in the eyes are unsettling as fuck.
Yeah,
they look horrible. I would imagine they were miserable to wear.
Especially for Jill.
This is a time when there weren't really soft contacts, so I'm assuming those are like glass contacts. Anybody who wore them said you couldn't see when you had them on, so you were essentially actually blind when you're wearing them. The actress who had them on the whole time, she had to have someone walk her around the sets and shit.
That's method acting.
Yeah, you ain't kidding. But yeah, there's some weirdness. Like, you can see in spots, obviously, that it's like a papier-mâché head. The scene you're talking about with the tarantulas, they actually went pretty in depth with that. Like there were dental casts made and stuff.
Yeah.
So like the bottom half is like a prosthetic mouth for the actor. Some of the spiders were real. Some of them were fake. I know, hard to believe some of the spiders.
Along.
Yeah, hard to believe some of those spiders were fake, but yeah, absolutely fake. There's also a strange amount of acid just around in this movie. Like I can't tell you how many times I've just had, a vat of acid that I was like, I'm just going to set it on top of this cabinet. I'm sure that'll be fine.
No lid.
Right. Why would you have
Fuck lids?
Obviously there's an anti-lid manifesto going on at that hospital. They don't believe in them.
The globalists.
The globalists.
The globalists don't believe in lids. Sorry.
So yeah, it was all that stuff was filmed in Italy. Any of the heavy effects, which we're going to do a little breakdown of the movie here in a minute. So the movie gets finished, right? And it hits its distribution. It was released in Italy on the 29th of April, 1981, where it grossed 700. Now this is a wild number. 747,615,662 lira on its initial run.
Okay. Which roughly is the equivalent of $416,000 in America.
Correct. Yeah, so it basically made its cost back on the initial release. It was considered okay business. It was less than what some of Fulci's earlier films had made, but it wasn't distributed everywhere immediately. It ended up being very successful in Spain. In England, as we mentioned before, it ended up on the Video Nasties list, and it was given an X rating. It would not be released uncut in the UK until 2001 on home video.
Oh, that's freedom.
Yeah, baby. In Germany, the film had a different title, obviously, which translated roughly to the ghost town of zombies, which, boy, that's nothing to do with what this fucking movie is. I barely could tell what this movie's about, and I know that's not what it's about. It didn't have a U.S. release until 1983. It was acquired for theatrical distribution in the U.S. by Terry Levine of Aquarius Releasing, who had previously handled some regional distribution for Halloween. He purchased those rights for $35,000 and then made decisions that seem fucking dumb to me. He spent $10,000 on additional post-production work, which included replacing the fucking score with a different one. It's a big questionable choice.
I'm sorry, but the sound, the score that he replaced it with fucking sucked.
It was bad. Yeah,
it was really fucking bad.
And he cut it down to get the R rating because it would have ended up with an X here too.
There's no nudity in it though.
But
I mean,
RoboCop didn't have nudity either, and that motherfucker got an X.
What?
Yes, you didn't know that RoboCop's original cut. There's a fucking
the original cut. Okay.
Yeah, RoboCop got an X, and then they cut it down to an R.
I did not know that. Holy
and
shit.
The brutal movie we saw as kids was the R cut. There's an X cut. You've never seen it?
No, I have never seen that.
Oh, the X cut of RoboCop's glorious.
Where can I find that?
It was on one of the DVD releases, I know. I'm, as much as this is blasphemy, I'm sure, to lots of listeners, I'm not a Blu-ray guy. I never really made the jump because there was all the weirdness in the beginning of Blu-ray with the Blu-ray and HD DVD, and I just said fuck it, and I just stream shit, and I own stuff on DVD, and I'll be honest, I can watch stuff on DVD and it doesn't look bad to me, so I never got into the Blu-ray thing. But so there
Same here. I only own 2 Blu-rays, and they're both the Swans documentaries. So
right, I own some Blu-rays. Like, I'm not anti-Blu-ray. I just don't like hunt it out. You know what I mean? Like, there are people who obsessively collect Blu-ray, and it's worked out for them because it's been a media for forever now, but I just don't. So anyways, he cuts the thing down to get the R rating, which gets you that 84-minute 7 Doors of Death cut. That comes out on November 11th, 83. The title change was a result of his belief that the original title was too nebulous.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that 7 Doors of Death is any better or worse than The Beyond.
Right.
But I guess it worked. I mean, he also did a thing where he screened it for Kim Henkel and Toby Hooper to get them to have quotes that he could market it with. Like, oh, guy who made Texas Chainsaw says, abadab. Check it out. He also Americanized all of the names in it, including Fulci being credited as Louis Fuller.
Right. And Catherine McCall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
7 Doors of Death was a commercial success, however.
Wait, that's cultural appropriation, isn't it? That's weird appropriation there. What he did?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
I think so.
The SJW in me is leaping out.
A little bit. I think there might be a little bit. Right. So it made 455, 652. Its opening week. $455,000, almost $456,000. It's estimated that it turned a profit of basically $700,000 for him on a $35,000 investment, which maybe helps make sense why Fulci's fucking poor dies poor, because you know he sells $5,000, somebody makes $700 off of it. And the fact that it gets fucking banned everywhere, or has issues coming out on any kind of video. So he's never making money off of it that way. Critics were kind of mixed on the movie, and I understand.
Right.
Like
you leave the screening of this movie very much mixed.
Yeah, so there's no fucking story, right? Like the story of this, if you try to follow this movie as if it has a narrative, you're doomed.
Right.
That's not what this movie is. You've got to think of this movie as much as Fulci is just like known for gore, and you're thinking you're probably just getting like a straight up horror movie full of fucking brutality. That's not what you're getting. You're getting a fucking art film that also happens to have a bunch of brutality in it. It's the whole thing's like a fucking fever dream. Like that's why the script, when earlier it was like, well, it was written by these people. I don't know what the fuck they wrote. There's multiple things that I found where cast members said, yeah, the script didn't really exist. It was sort of just like a 3-page outline, and Fulci just improvised all the time and would just tell you to say things and do things, and shit always changed. And most of the people involved in the movie had no idea what the fuck they were filming.
Right. And when, again, like you said, you're doomed if you try and follow some sort of narrative. And I think that there is some sort of subtext in there, sort of a commentary on the puritanical values, crucifying the warlock.
Fulci was a Catholic, or he was raised Catholic. So
yeah, I think he was having
shit here and there.
I think he was having issues with that, though, especially in that part of his life. I think he was trying to distance himself from his Catholicism. But I mean, of course, this is all just speculation and conjecture on my part, because I didn't know the guy. But I think that there was, especially in other films, Don't Torture a Duckling being one, I think that there was some sort of commentary on the Catholic religion.
Sure. I think there's commentary on a lot of things in this. I mean, there's people who think the end of the movie is like a metaphor for purgatory.
Right.
So the critics did not like this movie. Not surprising. Roger Ebert hated it. Said it was filled with bad dialogue and it had an incoherent plot. He's not wrong.
Right.
But
right.
You're not wrong.
But was he reviewing? Did he review? Was he reviewing The Beyond, or was he reviewing?
That was on the re-release. Yeah, that was for The Beyond. Kevin Thomas of the Los Angeles Times on the Seven Doors of Death release said it was just another rotting flesh ghoul parade. I don't know how you could watch this and think that it's just another gore movie, because there's so much weirdness going on in this motherfucker. I've watched plenty of gore, just straight up gore for the sake of gore movies. They do not have the weird artsiness that he went for on this. I have a quote from Fulci about the critics of this film, and part of it applies to me, because unpopular opinion, I don't know if I like this movie. I like it, but I don't know if I like it the way a lot of people like it. He said, people who blame The Beyond for its lack of story have not understood that it's a film of images, which must be received without any reflection. They say it is very difficult to interpret such a film, but it is very easy to interpret a film with threads. Any idiot can understand Carpenter's Escape from New York, while The Beyond or Argento's Inferno are absolute films. Now, there's a part of me that goes, okay, that's an artist trying to explain himself, and I'm a fan of weird shit. I'm a fan of, like, Holy Mountain, and I'm a fan of, David Lynch movies. I get it. I get the art film part. I think it's weird that he took a shot at John Carpenter. But this also kind of, to me, feels like a guy covering for making a weird fucking movie that makes no sense.
So I can understand why he took that swipe at Carpenter. I'm a fan of John Carpenter. Don't get me wrong. But I think that there was a growing dissatisfaction among people like Fulci, Argento, and others who thought that people like Carpenter, people who were the director of Friday the 13th, name escapes me at the moment. I apologize. I know that's blasphemy on this show.
Oh, my goodness.
That these people were taking things that started out with Bava, and they were borrowing certain things for their films. And so I think it all goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the sort of healthy competition. You diss the big dogs, you know what I mean? Because, Lucio Fulci was not a household name in America, obviously.
No, but at the same time, John Carpenter made The Thing, and for how glorified everybody is on, like, Fulci, the godfather of gore, I don't know, man. I think The Thing owns every Fulci movie.
Agree to disagree, but
fair
okay.
enough. Fair enough.
Fair enough. See, this is civil discourse. This is
true. I don't hate this movie. There are plenty of things I love about this movie. I guess I don't like that he tried to be like a pretentious prick about it. Like, oh, you're not smart enough to like my movie that makes no sense.
Yeah, see, I'm not a big fan of that. I think when you have to describe it like that to somebody, being someone who does a lot of that artsy fartsy shit, I wouldn't even think of it. I wouldn't dare sit there and go like, well, you're not smart enough to understand this 42 song concept record I did.
Right.
Even though I had to do a lot of defending on it. I'm not trying to interject myself, but I may say like, well, you're not high enough to listen to it, maybe, but
fair.
Fair enough. But yeah, I disagree with that. But as somebody who has had to sort of defend certain things like that maybe 95% of the population probably won't get.
Right.
I get that. I get it.
So the uncut version of this movie was not made available in the U.S. until after Fulci's death in 1996. Following his passing, the North American distribution rights were acquired by Sage Stallone.
Rest in peace, by the way.
for their company Grindhouse Releasing, who partnered Jesus. It took a lot of people to get this thing out. Grindhouse Releasing, who partnered with Quentin Tarantino and Rolling Thunder Pictures and Noah Cowan's Cowboy Booking International to re-release the film through a series of midnight screenings that happened in Los Angeles and New York City, and then 5 other locations on the 12th of June, 98, followed by a national rollout. That ended up making like $123,000, almost $124,000 in late 90s money, which is a lot closer to like what the real money would be now. There's not really a huge markup. It would probably be closer to like $250,000 now. But right. So on October 10th of 2000, Grindhouse Releasing co-distributed the film in a collaboration with Anchor Bay on DVD. It came out on a standard edition DVD or a limited edition tin box set, which I have, and I believe you do too.
Yes, sir.
That box is kind of nice. I think something that always cracks me up about the Anchor Bay releases from that time period, which fucking Anchor Bay put everything out for like that window of like 98 to 2008 or so, like a 10-year window. Man, they put just fucking everything was on Anchor Bay. Right. That box is nice, but like 20,000 copies is not limited for a movie like The Beyond. That means that basically anybody who wants The Beyond can get themselves a limited edition copy.
I think half of those are buried with Killjoy right now.
Maybe. I don't know, man. I know mine's downstairs. They did a lot of those metal tin boxes at Anchor Bay. I liked them. They were cool. That same year, Diamond Entertainment released 7 Doors of Death, cut from the original Laserdisc, though. So it wasn't it's the Beyond, but they released it as 7 Doors of Death.
Right. Now,
I guess there is in the works, it might be out now, even an actual release of 7 Doors of Death. The other stuff was recorded. There were interviews with Terry Levine and stuff done for it. I haven't seen it. I don't know it. There is a Blu-ray edition that came out of The Beyond in the U.S. That has 2 discs and the soundtrack. So that's out there for people who are looking for a real copy. But Grindhouse Releasing did a whole lot to bring movies like The Beyond to the public in a way that they hadn't been available before. And I think they deserve a little bit of credit for that. They were pretty early in on it, being like 98 when they did that theatrical run.
Sage Stallone, I mean, the guy had a real good eye for good horror. I mean, that edition that they did of I Drink Your Blood, fantastic. Just the attention to detail as far as the restoration of those films was Blue Underground does a great job, I think, of restoring some of those films, because I can't imagine how frustrating it must be to do that. I've never seen anyone do it. I've never done it myself, but I can't imagine it's an easy process. And so, major props goes to those people who do that.
Absolutely. And they were also the first company to make Cannibal Ferox and Cannibal Holocaust available in that way. And I think that deserves a little recognition as well. I kind of glanced over that on my Cannibal Holocaust episode. But that is definitely Sage Stallone's, I guess, calling card for his time here, really, was what he did for exploitation films and horror films, getting a wider audience for him. So a little appreciation to him.
Fuck opiates, fuck hard drugs. That's all I have to say when it comes to Sage Stallone.
I agree with you there.
Emily, why did you say I must give up the hotel?
I can't explain it to you. Just take my word for it. Go back to where you came from and hurry. Leave this place.
So let's talk about this fucking fever dream of a movie and like the shit you like about it and the shit that you maybe don't.
I'm a big fan of that sort of, mid to late 70s, early 80s feel. I always have been. The earliest horror films that I saw were from that generation. Growing up in an Italian family, and believe it or not, knowing what you know of Ray, my stepfather, the late Raymond Crustani, him and his family, his sons used to like to watch horror films late at night. So
I know that dude loved Planet of the Apes. I can't tell you how many times I saw him watch Planet of the Apes when we were kids.
Right. And Star Trek. He was a Trekkie. But yeah, they knew their horror, and so they got me into it, much to the chagrin of my mother. I love the atmosphere. I love the setting down in New Orleans. I thought that was I thought that was a great choice as far as the setting. I'm also a huge fan of, like you said too, about the fever dream aspect of it, where you just get lost. And one other thing I wanted to put in there too was the Joe the Plumber thing.
Not that Joe the Plumber, not the political Joe the Plumber, but very much Joe the I got the fuck killed out of me in this movie in a damp Louisiana basement plumber.
Right. A damp Louisiana basement that does not exist.
Right. And then rose out of a Louisiana tub on the fucking third floor later.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's those, I think those continuity errors that really, I mean, I guess that would be the sort of negative side of things that I didn't really like. But the Joe the Plumber thing I want to address real quick too.
Are they continuity errors? Because I don't think Fulci would say they are.
Right. I guess I'm too stupid to understand continuity error.
Yeah, you big dummy. You couldn't figure it out.
But in 2008, when the election was ramping up, I remember just hearing constantly Joe the Plumber, Joe the Plumber. I can't remember how many times John McCain used Joe the Plumber, and said it a lot. Yeah, I think it was like 60 or 70 times in one debate with Obama. But every time I heard that, I couldn't help but to think about, poor Joe the Plumber, who
this Joe the Plumber got a raw deal, man. He was just trying to fix shit. He ended up in purgatory hell.
He's a hardworking man. He was a hardworking man, and look what happened to him. Goddamn socialist Kenyan took him down to that fucking Louisiana basement.
Jesus, man.
Right.
So, man, something I like about this movie, because I am going to shit on it a little bit, and this is the first movie I've really shit on in, like, all of the ones I've covered. I dig that they use the Book of Ibon.
Right.
It's a Clark Ashton Smith thing from Weird Tales. It's very much, if you're not familiar with it, sort of like the Necronomicon, only I don't know that you can roll on down to Barnes & Noble and buy a paperback copy. It still lives.
If so, I'd be there right now.
It still lives in the fictional world. But I like that he used something from classic horror writing and incorporated it into the story. I dig that a bunch. And he made it like the central point of the whole thing is that book. Now, the book and the way it's portrayed in the movie is yet another thing that kind of hops around with no rhyme or reason and ends up it's with the blind lady. Oh, the blind lady's house is abandoned. It was just sitting on the floor there. Oh, it's in this library now. It's an elusive book, man. It jumps around. But, like, it's kind of like the basis of this story is it's a haunted house. And it's sort of maybe haunted in relationship to that book and the fact that it's built over one of the 7 gates to hell.
Right.
So I like it. I just like that he put that in there. Joe the plumber gets his eye popped out, and I think that's fantastic too.
I think it's a given pretty much in any Fulci movie. You're going to get your eyes gouged out.
Yeah, Fulci liked eyes, man. Joe the plumber gets it rough. I think it's weird that when she finds his body in the fucking basement that can't exist, people don't react to shit in this movie. Like, people's reaction time is way delayed. Like, they're like, oh, no, maybe this is bad. Maybe this could be bad. I don't know if this is bad. Is this bad? Fuck, I'm dead.
And, okay, a good example of that is Arthur going through Liza's room.
Yeah.
She comes in like, what are you doing here? What? And then, we don't see or hear from him until what? Towards the end, where they're in the hospital, they go through a door, and then suddenly from that door they're in the basement.
Yeah, man.
Going into the purgatory. It's like,
oh, but in that part of the movie, nothing makes fucking sense. Like,
nothing,
because the elevator opens into that fucking autopsy room. But when they ride the elevator, they get off of it on the same floor, like out in the hallway. Nobody pays attention to that do not entry sign. Nobody at all pays attention to do not entry. Apparently anyone can just go in that autopsy room. She comes in and puts all the fucking clothes on Joe the plumber's body. Not like the mortician, not anybody else. She comes in and dresses him up right there in the fucking autopsy room. Then that little girl gets to go in there, and she's got to fucking run from the melted pool of her mom. I think it was her mom.
Yeah. Well, and then they buried him, or they buried Joe the plumber, and I assume they buried the mother at the cemetery there.
Yeah.
She becomes possessed, but then somehow Joe the plumber then comes back in the basement again, right?
Yeah, and they bury people fast. Like, I don't know what the timeline is on shit there, but it seems lickety fucking split. Like, it's the same day, because so in the meantime, you've got fucking Liza driving across the causeway, strange woman just standing in the middle of the road with her dog. Her reaction is to stop. And then she's like, oh, I've been looking for you. And that throws up no fucking red flags. Instead, she's like, no, I'll go back to your creepy house with you so you can play piano and tell me to get the fuck out of the house I just inherited.
Yeah, no gas money either. Like,
yeah, I mean, that lady makes bizarre choices. Like, she then goes like midday drinking in Louisiana with a car full of groceries. Those groceries are gonna spoil. You can't do that.
Especially in that Louisiana heat.
Yeah, there's no way. Those groceries aren't good anymore. And then the fucking doctor, who she just runs into on like driving down the road, right? And then they're like, oh, well, let's go day drinking at this fucking bar with a jazz band that is not playing loud enough for you to not be able to talk. I've been in a lot of bars in New Orleans. If there's a goddamn jazz band playing, you can't fucking talk in that bar. I call bullshit. But the hospital calls him at the fucking bar in the middle of the day. Like, is that guy's MO? It's like, middle of the day, I'm going to be drinking at this specific bar in the French Quarter. If you need me at the hospital, call that bar up.
I'm reminded of Where the Buffalo Roam, where Bill Murray played Hunter. And he's in San Francisco meeting with his lawyer at that bar. And all of a sudden, like, Bruno Kirby's calling him at the, like, yep, you know exactly where to fucking find me.
And then, like, people get what they're asking for in this fucking movie. Like, hey, don't go in that room. She busts in the fucking room. Right. Spooky door opens after you find an old book. You just go over and check it out. That's dumb. Nope.
I think Maze of Death thing.
Yeah. And the dialogue makes no sense. Which, I mean, Fulci, almost everybody who was interviewed about the script said there wasn't one. So, sure. It's like he didn't even try to make it make sense.
Right.
And then, like, the tarantulas thing is totally just a man, people don't like spiders. I could put spiders in this, and then there'll be people who are like, oh man, I can't stand that spider scene. Like, he can pretend that was art or whatever, but that was just playing on like people's fears.
Oh yeah, big time. I think David Warbeck's character in that movie too, being the skeptic, you know, I think that sort of reflected too, like what we were talking about before about how Fulci was sort of disillusioned with his faith and stuff like that. So, you know, just reading into it a little bit more about how, you know, because his character was an atheist, you know, and skeptical of all these things that were happening that Liza was telling him, like, you know, it's like, you know, this woman's crazy, you know, that none of this stuff exists. It's all in her head, you know?
Right. And like, nobody runs in this fucking movie, right? Like, nobody sees shit that's wrong and just takes off running. Like, in this scene, she bare hands the plug in the tub of that fucking nasty water. Zero chance I'm doing that. Zero. Then Melody Joe rises up out of that fucking shit real slow. She doesn't run. Not at all. Ends up getting her eye popped out on that nail.
Yeah.
Then,
which I think that also happened in Zombie, right? Or was that was a wooden stake? Was that a wooden? I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, eye pops, man. That's a Fulci thing.
Yeah.
And then, like, you're back in that fucking autopsy room, and a corpse that had been on the table before all that chaos and the woman melted down and all that shit happened is still in there, and the room is clean. Get the fuck out of here. There's zero chance that's happened. The fucking dog, in my opinion, is the best actor in the whole movie.
Dickie.
The dog is great. And that fucking demon corpse that the dog attacks struggles more than most of the actual people do in this movie.
I would love to know, like, what did they do? Did they put, like, peanut butter on that thing? Or...
they had to put something.
I mean, he looks like he's getting roughed up quite a bit by Dickie there. And I'm rewatching that. I noticed just, like, you know, how much he is struggling. I mean, either he was really getting mauled, which would have been really fucked up, or, you know, they just put a bunch of peanut butter on him, and, like,
could be.
You know,
that very well could have been.
Dickie's licking him to death. Again, don't take that out of context.
Right. And so, like, that redhead girl ends up in there again. My biggest issue with this movie, if you really want to talk to me about, like, continuity shit and shit that's wrong in this movie, that man has a revolver. A fucking 6-shot revolver. And he fires, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 shots at the zombies once they show up.
Very few in the head. Very few in the head.
Almost none, but when he shoots that girl in the head, or that kid in the head, man, it fucking explodes.
That is a beautiful death scene. I would put that up there with that scene in Maniac.
Yeah, that scene in Maniac is untouchable. That's fucking chef's kiss. But this one's pretty fucking good.
And Suspiria.
Yeah. That Maniac one though.
Yeah. Oh,
the only time you see him, like, try to reload the gun really is the one scene in the elevator, and he's trying to put the bullet in the fucking end of the gun.
Yeah.
Like, the wrong way. Like, it's so what the fuck's going on there? I do like the scene where the dude gets all the glass in his face.
Yeah.
Like, he shoots the glass and the glass fucking explodes into his face. That's really good. And then, yeah, man, they pop out into the hotel at the end, which makes no sense. And then they're in purgatory. And I guess originally it was supposed to be an amusement park.
Really?
Yeah, that they were going to open that door, and instead of it being the hellscape from the painting, it was going to be an amusement park, and it was supposed to be a metaphor for purgatory and how they were going to be able to ride indefinitely on the ride of existence.
Wow.
Shit. Yeah, but instead it was that, you know, the fucking endless purgatory scene.
The Beyond is a beautiful ending. I mean, really beautiful. And when with the right set of eyes, when you watch that movie,
Not the set of eyes they end up with.
No, and keep your eyes away from any Fulci actor or the reanimated ghost of Lucio Fulci. But watching it's really unsettling.
It is. But Fulci does make an appearance in this movie. He's in the librarian. Yeah.
But yeah, I just can't imagine an amusement park that kind of threw me for a loop when you said that, because I didn't know that. And,
I don't think it would have been very good. I think circumstances created a much better ending for this movie.
Absolutely, but what would have been great is if they had the budget to incorporate that, as an alternate ending and watch it. I'd be really curious to see what that would look like. I mean, I can visualize it, but damn.
Unfortunately, that's as close as you're gonna get.
Right.
So yeah, all in all, man, I don't hate The Beyond, and I respect The Beyond for what it is. It is not my favorite of the three gates of hell.
What is your
real
favorite?
estate? House by the Cemetery.
Yeah. It definitely had a more cohesive narrative, to the extent that there are narratives in Fulci movies.
Yeah, I think it's a little more straightforward. I just like it better. I also saw it first.
Right.
So that might play into it for me, but I don't hate this, but I do not love The Beyond the way others do. I appreciate it for what it is, but I don't know, man, maybe I'm a big dummy, but sometimes I like a narrative in my movies. Like even like the shit that I love from other directors that do very art film kind of things, like Lynch, I like the things he does that have a narrative better than like Mulholland Drive.
Great movie, though. God damn, I love that movie.
It is, but I would rather watch like the first season of Twin Peaks.
Right.
Like that's just me. Or like I love Holy Mountain, but there is a narrative that goes through in between all of the trippy art shit in that movie. There's like a story, and I don't know that there is in The Beyond, or at least one that makes any sense outside of like lady inherits a haunted house.
Right. I agree, but I think that's part of the charm of the movie for me. I just we both, we grew up together. We both love a lot of tripped out shit, but for me, sometimes I like movies that have no meaning. You know what I mean? Stuff that just, why the fuck is it there? What is this all about? And ultimately, I think the people, us, we can interpret it however we choose to, and I think that's the beauty in creating something like that. I've read, in researching for this, I think 4 or 5 different theories as to what people think it's about. Who knows? I mean, I think Fulci still has a daughter that's alive right now, right? I think.
Yeah, I believe so.
And I think to a certain degree, she's tried to carry the torch of her father's legacy. I've read some of the notes in Cat in the Brain, which I think, by the way, I think that movie right there probably has the most cohesive plot in any of the Fulci series of horror films. And I guess it would have to, because it was about him.
Right.
It was about his life. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this movie. I've always been a really big fan of this movie. I put it up there with Inferno from Argento. I think Fulci was spot on when he said that. I don't think people are dumb if they don't get it.
He does.
He does. but he said a lot of shit. He said, his views on psychology and Freud too were interesting, I thought. But
dude, and one thing we didn't talk about that I will give him credit for that I like, and some people might not like it. I've actually seen people specifically say they don't like it, but I love like the sepia tone opening to this movie.
Oh yeah,
which was an added thing. Like it was a choice he made after getting to Louisiana and finding out that there was this spot on the lake that he could shoot that at and stuff. But I think it was the correct choice. I also like that all those fucking people got dressed up to the nines to go kill somebody.
Right. Yeah, it's a brutal scene to watch. Yeah, you ungodly warlock. I mean, I feel for that guy. You know, I really felt for Schweik, I believe is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really felt for him. He was
that fucking smack to the face, that very first chain smack.
Yeah.
And it busts his face open. I am convinced that fucking Mel Gibson has watched The Beyond, because it is almost shot for shot the same as one of the first whacks in the Jesus movie that he
Passion
made.
of Christ.
That one,
Passion.
yeah. I almost said The Last Temptation of Christ, which is a much better movie.
Yeah. Not one action figure came out of Passion of Christ. Not one. Not one.
Oh, I don't know, man. I see a lot of people with that. He's on, they wear him on a necklace and shit.
Yeah, those are knockoffs, bootlegs. Chi-Con.
I've seen him on people's walls too. That doesn't count as an action figure when he's up there on the.
Sometimes they have it upside down.
They do sometimes. It's
which
true.
Would be more historically accurate.
But somehow very offensive to many Christians.
I don't get it. Pope wears one.
Well, man, it has been good having you back on here. I'm sure you will be back on again in the not so distant future.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Do you want to plug anything, man?
I'll make it. Hey, how about this? How about I make a formal announcement, although I don't have a date. But the artwork is done. Solo album, last one, conceptualization and treatment for the unencumbered mind. My latest solo effort it's already out digitally. You can find that at bandcamp.com. Just search my name, Jason R Donnelly, and the tape version of that, which I have. You can't watch this, but I have. You can hear them, and you can see them. Stacey.
I can see them. Yes, I can see them.
This is just 4 of them, but they're numbered, and we're doing 35 of those. And that will be out shortly. The formal announcement will be made, but I'm announcing it here for the first time. They will be out. I just don't know the exact date. By the end of the year, I know that.
Nice. And you've got other stuff too. You've got your Agonist Revival stuff. Is that on the same Bandcamp on the Jason R Donnelly one?
I'm not, well, they're all linked, but it's yeah, I mean, you can find Agonist, just search Agonist Revival for that.
Let people know what kind of music that is.
Okay. It's a lot of that's hard for me to do, honestly.
I'll tell people what it is.
Sure.
If you like drone stuff, if you like, I'll say this. While it's not in the same exact vein, I think if you like Neurosis or Swans or things like that, you will dig what Jason does in Agonist Revival. And give it a listen. Go check it out. I am a fan of the music that my friend does, and I would appreciate it if everyone went and gave it a listen. And if you like it, give him $1 or $2 for it.
Appreciate it. You said it best. I can't do it. So
I understand, man. I can't plug my own shit ever.
there is more Agonist coming out. There was an EP that was put out a couple months ago.
You put out that really cool edition in the little sealed drive. I never opened mine because I don't want it to be open. I want to leave it the way it was because I'm a weirdo. But you sent me all the tracks so I could listen to it. Yeah. But the shirt, everything, you put out a whole package and it was really fucking cool. He does a lot of limited release stuff, which suits, I think, the projects that you do perfectly. Makes them feel like you're getting something special. So.
Yeah. Westboro abortion clinic stuff too. There's the music for the new Westboro abortion's done, but I haven't been able to do the vocals because I've just been so fucking busy with everything else. I
totally understand that.
Yeah, I there's also another project I did called Glorified Dirt. You can find that on Bandcamp. There's also the digital version. I don't know when they're going to put the digital version. I mixed and mastered a band called Jonas the Third. They're out of Houston. A couple of young men down there that they're fans of what I do. So they're like, hey, why don't you come in and do some mixing and mastering and some I think I do vocals on one or two tracks, and then I did a couple of Segway drone tape things. And I did the same with Glorified Dirt, which is sort of like a lo-fi crust punk kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I did all the segues and all that stuff. If you haven't heard that, by the way, go check. I think that those are the fun things to do. When I start doing Agonists and stuff like that, that's when I go into my real artsy sort of nobody understands me bullshit. So.
And then at some point in the next year, you and I and our friend Nick are doing a new project.
I'm really looking forward to that.
It'll be the first music I've done in a while. A long while.
We need more music from Stacy, please.
I don't know if that's true, but I'm going to do this.
It's true.
So, everybody, thank you for listening. There were going to be a lot more episodes this month. And unfortunately, and I had mentioned for anybody who listened to Wrestling Cheers when I was on there, that I was going to do a rundown of like friendly horror. And I found out I had COVID later that week, and it just didn't happen. So October being what it was supposed to be, didn't really become a reality. But there is going to be a November episode, which I believe is going to be the Blair Witch Project with my friend Trevor. And then there is going to be another Christmas episode in December tackling another Christmas horror movie, which brings us to the first full year of this show. And then it's going to be monthly going forward after that. Next year, there's going to be, I've got a lot of cool stuff lined up. So keep listening. Thank you very much and enjoy your Halloween.